Can I close your door?
Yeah, go ahead. Hello?
Hey, oh, you gotta.
Hey Kyle, this is Amy, one of your interpreters. Hi, we were just wondering how you would like us to work for us switching, since there's two of us. Okay, I wasn't sure if you needed us to let you know in the chat or something in a little bit ahead of time, or how you're spotlighting or whatever on your end. Okay, yeah, we can definitely let you know that we're going to switch. So it is interpreter Tracy Kleppe, but she is under Amy Fryman's name. And then I'm Amy Simonson, or Amy S. Thank you.
It might sound better.
Lots better, David.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, everyone, it is 6 p.m. I am going to go ahead and get started now. Good evening and welcome to the first in a series of Milwaukee County 2022 Budget Town Halls. My name is Shanika Fitch, Director of Community Relations for Milwaukee County, and I will serve as your moderator this evening. We will have introductory remarks by Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley and other county leaders, followed by the 2022 budget presentation, and then public comment and questions before we conclude this evening. We do have some ground rules for participating this evening. Each person will have 2 minutes to make a comment and/or ask a question. Participants will receive a reminder with 30 seconds remaining. Milwaukee County staff reserve the right to mute participants who do not adhere to our ground rules. We begin this evening with Milwaukee County Executive David Crowley.
Well, thank you so much, Shanika. I want to say thank you to everybody joining us. This is our first budget town hall that we are having for the 2022 budget. So I just want to say thank you again for joining us. But before I get started, I want to ask that if there are any supervisors that are on right now to pop in and just say that you are here. Welcome, everybody who's tuned in, and introduce yourself. All right, so no supervisors are on at this time, so I'll just go ahead and continue to move on. But I know that we have many department leaders also on the call, so I'm going to go through a list. If I name the department and you are on the call, please feel free to turn on your camera, unmute yourself, and introduce yourself. And so we're going to start with the Department of Administrative Services.
Thank you, County Executive Crowley. This is Aaron Hertzberg, Director of Department of Administrative Services.
Thank you, Aaron. Next up, Human Resources.
Good evening, Margot Franklin, Chief Human Resources Officers from the Department of Human Resources.
Good to see you, Margot. Child Support.
Yes, hello, County Executive Crowley and members of the public. I'm Jim Sullivan. I'm the Director of Child Support Services, and I look forward to our budget discussion tonight.
Good to see you, Jim. All right, moving on. Emergency Management.
Good evening. My name is Chris McGowan. I'm the Deputy Director of the Office of Emergency Management.
Good to see you, Chris. All right, Office on African American Affairs. All right, we'll keep going. Health and Human Services.
Good evening, County Executive Crowley, Shakita LeGrant McLean, Director of Department of Health and Human Services.
All right, Corporation Counsel. All right, moving on. House of Corrections.
Good evening. My name is Chantel Jewell, and I am the Superintendent of the House of Correction.
Good to see you, Chantel. All right, our Medical Examiner. He may be a bit busy. Parks.
Good evening, Jeremy Lucas, Director of Administration and Planning for Milwaukee County Parks.
All right, good to see you, Jeremy. Transportation.
Good evening, County Executive Crowley. My name is Donna Brown Martin. I'm the Director of the Department of Transportation for Milwaukee County.
Good to see you, Donna. All right, Zoo.
Good evening. I'm Vera Westfall, Deputy Zoo Director for the Milwaukee County Zoo.
Good to see you, Vera. All right, do we have anyone from the Sheriff's Office?
Good evening, Mr. Executive and members of the public. Ted Chisholm, Chief of Staff to Milwaukee County Sheriff Ernell Lucas.
Good to see you, Ted. All right, now do we have any other elected officials or board supervisors also with us? Feel free to turn off your camera, unmute yourself, and introduce yourselves. All right. All right, so I'm just going to go right ahead and get started with the budget presentation. Again, thank you for joining us. So as you can see first right here on our first slide, this is really our mission and our vision within Milwaukee County, because we truly believe that by achieving racial equity, Milwaukee will be the healthiest county in the state of Wisconsin. And it is our duty to enhance the quality of life in Milwaukee through great public service. So we want to continue to serve this public to the best of our ability. Next slide. And so while we provide a lot of different critical services throughout Milwaukee County. A lot of those things that some of the most vulnerable people in our community really need. So when you think about our housing programs, when you think about mental health, public safety, but one thing that I know everybody has an opportunity to enjoy is our parks and our transportation system. But we also have programs for our youth. But also when you think about all the some of the cultural entities that we have throughout Milwaukee County, and these are places that make us a place to enjoy, where people want to come or want to stay because they enjoy our amenities. So let's go to the next slide. And so right now, since I've been in office, and I think we've been talking about this for at least a decade throughout Milwaukee County, is that we are in a fiscal crisis. And so we really don't have enough funding to really keep up with the current level of programs and services that we currently provide. And so with the fact that we've had to make cuts in the past, we haven't been able to really make the investments really needed in this community to make sure that we are thriving. And so if we want to achieve this vision and become the healthiest county, we're going to need a sustainable funding solution moving forward. Next slide. And so if you look at this graphic, right now you see a person holding up a boulder. Now, we're not trying to push that boulder up the hill necessarily. What we're trying to do right now is make sure that we don't get pushed off of the cliff. And we are approaching the edge right now. And so we have to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to lift up vital community services for those who particularly need it. And so without the tools to really compensate for the increased cost of state mandated services and the limited amount of ways that we can raise funds, we're seeing this financial cliff grow really steep. And so in 6 years, we won't have any local dollars to really fund our local programs. And again, that goes back to many of the services that I talked about. When we talked about public safety, when we talk about our parks, transportation, senior services, disability programs as well, all the services that make us great is going to make it really difficult to fund these priorities. Move forward. Thank you. And so when you think about what we have been through just within the past, 18 months, year and a half with the pandemic, we know that we needed to provide a quality level of service, but what we're seeing also is that these needs are increasing. And so throughout the pandemic, we had the opportunity to really help out so many individuals. And as you can see on this slide, we had over 7,700 people apply for rental assistance from March to July of 2021. And if you look at the stat, overwhelmingly, there have been young Black women throughout this community. And so it's really important that when we think about how we make our investments, we have to make sure that we're looking through an equitable lens. And we've been doing everything that we can to do that, not only with what we have, but also with the CARES dollars that we've received. Next slide. And so not only, one of the biggest issues that when we talk about this pandemic, and we've seen a correlation not only with suicide attempts, but drug use deaths throughout this community, is the EMS calls are also increasing. And so we've seen a huge jump in costs, particularly in communities of color and in the Black community, as it relates to mental health. So we know that we need to do everything that we can to stay ahead of the curve in providing quality mental health throughout this community. But again, the needs in this community are rising because of this pandemic. Next slide. And so as you see the arrow, this is talking about our revenues are decreasing. And one of the reasons why is because of the flat but also decreasing of state funds. Whether we talk about the stagnant shared revenue or the fact that we don't have other means of raising revenue right here locally throughout the county. But we've also seen cuts coming down the line, and I'll get a little bit into that. But we're also sending a lot more money to the state. And so even though we have seen a lot more economic activity throughout Milwaukee County within the past decade, we're receiving much less back than we have in the past. And this is continuously affecting us. And when you think about the pandemic, this has caused even more revenue loss. So it feels like it's just compounding right now. Next slide. And so on this slide, you'll see a graph, and it will show you, where we are with general transportation aid, basic community aid, shared revenue, as far as also mass transit operating assistance that we receive all throughout the state. And as you can see, how it's has started to decline from starting in 2010, but since about 2017, it's pretty much been stagnant. But one of the things I really want you to focus on is the mass transit operating assistance, where we're going to see about a $30 million drop. Well, we have seen about a $30 million drop, and we will see within the next year to 2 years. Next slide. Due to the some of the things that they did with the state budget. And so, raising revenue, we're strapped again. Like we are the 6th highest property tax burden, in the United States. So we already have high property taxes. And so we have raised property taxes as much as we can. And when you think about the scale of the issue for Milwaukee County, we would have to raise property taxes about 40% to match the issue, the gap that we're talking about. And that's not sustainable for any of us. And I like my job, so I want to stay here. But we have to figure out different ways of raising the revenues. Next slide. And so right here, we're talking about how it's been flat since 2010, and it's subject to competing state budget priorities. And so, and this goes back to that cut that I was talking about. And so within this past budget, the 2023 budget, state budget, they reduced our transit aids to Milwaukee County by $32.7 million, and this is going to take a toll on us. But this is one of the reasons why we continue. And we're probably going to talk about the next slide. Let's talk about the local option sales tax. Next slide. But this also talks about the fact that we only have certain tools in the toolbox, and one of the very limited tools that we have is the vehicle registration fee. And that's not going to provide enough revenue for us to really meet the needs that we have. And so, and when we bring that in, when we bring those dollars in, it's only limited to uses related to transportation. Next slide. And so, as we talk about the fiscal issue that we are in, a lot of people always ask, what are the federal dollars doing? What are you doing with the money that you're receiving from the federal government, whether we're talking about CARES or ARPA? And so through the American Rescue Plan, we received $183 million. We already received the first tranche. We're getting another tranche, I believe, May of next year. But the actual revenue loss is estimated to be about double of what we have already seen. I think some of our estimates may be between $300 to $400 million by the year 2023-24. And so, what we want to do is make sure that we allow for input on this, and thanks to the county board working with them, we've developed an ARPA task force who's going to develop recommendations to the Milwaukee County Board about how we're going to spend those dollars. Next slide. But it's also critical to understand that these ARPA funds are one-time funds, so we have to allocate these dollars by the year 2020 through 2024, and so. When you think about that in the structural deficit that we are facing, this is not going to fix our structural long-term budget problem. Next slide. And so this is where the local option sales tax revenue comes in, because this will help provide relief for all of us, right? And so this will help stabilize the financial situation that we are currently in, but more importantly, it allows us to make investments in our local priorities and protective services, as well as providing that property tax relief. Next slide. And so when we think about our mission and vision, we need a sustainable revenue source in order to really make the investments that we need to make, because it's the only way to make sure that we are moving this community forward. We are third last right now when it comes down to being a healthy community within Milwaukee County. So we want to continue to move the needle. And we want to make sure that we're being strategic and intentional on how we do that. Next slide. And so we need your help. I would tell you that, we've been making some inroads at the state level on both sides of the aisle as it relates to the local sales tax options. And so anything that you can do will be great as well, because we need as many voices on this particular issue as we can. And we're building coalitions to let folks know, from government to community leaders to business leaders, about why this is important. And so if you want to find who your legislator is, your state representative or your state senator, and give them a call, please visit myvote.wi.gov. It'll let you know who your legislator is and let them know how you feel about this particular issue and about how we want to attract both human capital as well as businesses to this area and make sure that we thrive as a community. And if you're interested in staying update on how this is going, how this particular campaign and local option sales tax campaign at the state level is going, feel free to visit the website moveforwardmke.org. Again, I want to say thank you for this opportunity. And right now, we're going to transition over to Director Joe Lamers. Joe Lamers is the director of our Performance Strategy and Budget Office, and he's going to talk about basically give a budget summary, talking about our operating budget as well as capital budget and some of our next steps. So thank you again for joining us all, and I'll hand it over to Joe.
Thank you, County Executive. And before we move on to Joe, I just ask that if you can turn your camera off until you are speaking. That is the best time to turn your camera on when you are speaking. So that goes to our guests that are participating via the link, as well as our Milwaukee County staff members. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Joe Lamers, the budget director for the county, and I'm going to provide some additional details and information regarding the 22 budget and some further info regarding what our county executives had spoken to. So in regards to the 22 budget, just some summary information is being provided here. First, when we look at our budget and development of our budget, we're really looking at achieving our vision at Milwaukee County. Vision is by achieving racial equity, Milwaukee County will become the healthiest county in Wisconsin. And three of the fundamental tenements that we're looking at to achieve this vision are creating intentional inclusion, bridging the gap, and investing in equity. So the slide describes some of the details behind what we're looking at regarding those items, such as reflecting diversity of the county within our workforce, determining where funding will be spent, and investing dollars upstream to address root causes of health disparities. So within the budget process, we're asking all departments to take a close look at these guidelines, and we created something called a racial equity budget tool that all departments are asked to carefully consider as they develop their budget requests to ensure that our budget is advancing our vision. So on the next slide, just some background on where we spend our funds at Milwaukee County. If I go down to the bottom left, that largest portion of the county's operating budget goes to health and human services programs like our behavioral health division, disability services, housing programs, and other human services. They make up over 1/3 of our operating budget. The next largest piece of our budget here would be transportation programs. Largest programs within there are the airport and our bus system. And then we also provide courts and judiciary services here, public safety, particularly the sheriff and Office of Emergency Management, and also within our $1.1 billion budget, our administrative costs and debt service costs to pay for some of our capital projects, and about $60 million on parks, recreation, and culture, about 5% of our budget. The next slide speaks to the revenues that help to fund our budget. On this area, the largest funding source within our operating budget is program revenues. These are revenues that are collected directly as a result of services provided. So, for example, the airline fees that go into running the airport, health revenues that go to support human services programs, revenues collected by the zoo for admission, and parks for some of the programs they operate. And the largest single source of revenue is the property tax at about $304 million. We also collect a sales tax. 0.5% of the 5.5% collected comes to Milwaukee County. The other 5% goes to the state. We're bringing in about $70 million for our operating budget, plus another 10 is dedicated within our capital funding. State revenues, those again are largely reimbursements for healthcare type services, make up almost 1/4 of our budget. State shared revenue is called out as an item that's available for more flexible uses of government services, 27 million. And we also have federal reimbursement revenues of around 80 million. The state and federal dollars are basically reimbursement for services that we're providing on behalf of the state and federal government. Most of our programs are operated under state and or federal mandates. So that's the background on what's in our budget and how it's funded. And then on the next slide, discussing just what our budget outlook is for 2022. And what we're seeing is a trend that if you followed past budget hearings or county budget documents, we've been operating with a ongoing structural funding imbalance for several years. Basically, we are capped on the revenues that we're allowed to collect by state statutes. And also at the same time, the cost of services, many of those services mandated by the state are going up. And the amount we're allowed to increase in revenue is not going up by the cost of increased expenses that are due to inflation. So on average, we see revenues going by about 1% and then expenses going up by 2.4%. On $1 billion budget, that can come to a gap of about $20 million is what we're estimating for 2022. That's primarily caused by that structural ongoing imbalance. There are some other factors, but the structural deficit is the primary issue. We have a different set of funding for our capital projects. We use bond financing for capital projects and isolate that from the operating budget. We do have constraints on that side as well. We have a lot of infrastructure at Milwaukee County. If you think about all of our parks and all the buildings that we have to operate our programs, we have a lot of infrastructure needs that need to be taken care of, buses and fleet. When we look at our budget requests for capital this year, they're exceeding what we see for available financing by $78 million just for this year alone. So we will be trying to determine how we will resolve that issue this year and upcoming. Our county executive did mention we have federal recovery funds available in our budget, and that certainly has the option of providing some relief. However, we are not intending to use these funding to close our operating budget gap. That would only set us up for failure in the long term, because those funds are once those funds are not available, they will run out, and it will cause us to hit a fiscal cliff by 2024 or 2025. So what we really need are sustainable solutions to resolve our financial constraints and allow the county to invest in needs going forward to advance our vision and fund local priorities for locally generated revenues. On the next slide, just going into a little more detail on our revenue limitations, but the sales tax, we have that 0.5% sales tax in our budget. Under current state law, that's the most we're allowed to charge. There have been legislative proposals at the state level to allow the county and possibly other counties and cities to increase the sales tax by up to 1% more. But as of now, that item is pending. And as our county executive had indicated, this would be an option for us, if approved at the state level, to resolve some of our funding gaps that were challenged by. Money from the state we had seen has been flat for many years, and in this upcoming budget is actually reduced by over $30 million. These are funding that are there to support mandated services that we provide for the state government, and we're not getting any level of increase to provide those services. On the property tax side, there's limited to a formula that's based on new construction in the county. We can only increase our property tax collections by the amount of net new construction, which tends to be limited to about 1% per year on average. So it's our largest revenue source that, again, not keeping up with inflation, and the property tax limitation is really one of the biggest drivers of our imbalance. With the vehicle registration fee, that's one area under statutes we could do an increase. We currently do have a $30 rate, and and it's a challenge to increase up above that. The cost could only be available for transportation related expenses, not overall county services. The next slide shows, despite the fact that our state funding is down, we're showing here that the amount of money that Milwaukee County taxpayers send to the state has actually gone up pretty dramatically. Based on data from the State Department of Revenue, we sent about $1.9 billion to the state of Wisconsin in 2010. And if we look to 2018, the most recently available reporting from the Department of Revenue, we were at over $2.4 billion. So that's a $500 million increase in revenue from Milwaukee County taxpayers for items like sales tax and income taxes that is going to the state, but we are not seeing that revenue come back to the county through our state aid programs. Next slide. I talked about a $20 million budget gap this year. When we look back on the last 10 years, on average, we do this every year where we're trying to calculate out how much do we need to close our gap. The average is about 30 million. So over 10 years, we closed about $300 million of budget gaps. And I'll just go over a few of the examples we're doing here. Reducing footprint on county buildings by over 1 million square feet saves estimated $9 million. We've restructured our healthcare benefit programs, savings of 40 million. Staff have been reduced across county departments by 1,400. And that does not include human service functions that transition to the state. Those are just pure reductions in positions. That saved $116 million. Salary steps at the county, we have a salary step structure where employees would receive raises on an annual basis. Those, unfortunately, due to our funding constraints, have been frozen, and we've been subject to very limited level of increase, savings of 55 million. Those are examples of all the changes that we've had to make to resolve these funding issues. And point being, we've really done a lot of changes to result in savings to date. And as we look forward to budget, it just becomes more and more challenging to make these kind of reductions without impacting services that are provided. The next slide, just the structural deficit that I'm describing is permanent without a funding solution. So we can resolve this year's gap, and we will have another situation next year where we can expect a $20 to $30 million deficit. This runs it out for a 20-year period and says we would have a $300 million deficit by the year 2040 if no changes were made. That's consistent with what we've had when we look backwards. There are some spikes in there. We expect savings related to changes in healthcare and pension liabilities. So there will be some good years in that time horizon, but for the most part, we are seeing deficits. The next slide, in terms of how we're closing the gap, we typically, because of our funding situation, have to issue tax levy targets to departments. Oftentimes we ask them to submit, when they submit their budget requests, to do reductions. For the upcoming year, we actually ask them to submit a request that's the exact same as last year. While it's not a cut, there's actually about $12 million of inflationary costs for either salaries or contractual services that departments have to absorb then when they make their requested budget. So that's part of how the gap gets closed. Other items we're looking at as we develop the budget, we do have a debt service reserve that's available for limited term purposes. We have seen an increase in the sales tax that's been collected recently. So we can take a look at our projection. That's just on our existing 0.5% tax. We've seen somewhat of a rebound, but we are also concerned that the impacts of COVID can really have a detrimental impact on the amount of sales tax that are collected. We saw that last year. This year we had been seeing a rebound, but again, the impacts of COVID have been on the rise. So that's one we have to be cautionary on. We can look at the recovery fund, but well, again, we see that as a one-time funding source. There may be some areas of our budget that are limited term or one-time costs that could be appropriate for recovery funds, But overall, we do not see that as a solution to our funding gap, and it would not be a best practice in government finance or grant accounting to use the recovery funds to close our annual budget gaps. And then we also look at healthcare plan design and some other items like that. So that's how we're working on trying to get down to that 20 million, and we have to do that before we can, begin to look at how do we make new investments. On the next slide, it describes similar, in some instances, worst scenario on our capital funding. It says capital needs outpace our funding. The chart there may be a little difficult to read on that smaller scale, but this is basically showing in the yellow, what's represented there are the projects that we have funding for under the county's bond financing limitations. The gray are additional project requests that are coming from departments that are not funded. So if we just look at 2022, we have about 55 million of funding, but there's actually another $78 million of requests that departments put forward. So we're not able to fund that 78 million. We just had our capital improvements committee meeting today, and departments are making a case to move their projects within the funding category. Some of the items may be related to life safety, maybe public safety services, could be items that have federal revenue attached. So these are items that are really difficult decisions to put within or outside of that funding line. In the future years, we have even larger costs because that aren't funded, because we have some large projects that are needed of improvement, like our safety building is outdated and needs replacement. We have a lot of buses that are reaching the end of their useful life, things like that. On the next page is just describing a little bit about what's in the capital request, some of our large projects. Our Department of Transportation has a North Shop where that's a shop for our transportation vehicles and repair and storing of fleet and maintenance and upgrades. That building desperately needs to be replaced. It's a $15 million project. Our COGS Human Service Center needs improvements for accessibility. It's also an aging building that just needs general upgrades and improvements. This year's requests are 11 million. If we look forward to the 5-year plan, there's 40 to $50 million of project needs related to our Human Service Center building. South Shore Breakwater is a project for the lake shore that is needed related to the water flow there, $17 million. The local share of bus replacements, $6 million. We have a much larger federal share that can help pay for buses, but we need to contribute 20% to draw that down. And we have some large cost parking lots that need improvements in our park system. So those are some of our major projects. If we look overall, we had 134 million of requests with 55 million of funding, and that's that estimated gap of $78 million that we're trying to resolve. The next slide talks about ARPA. Our county executive did mention this. We received $183 million allocation. There are limitations to how that funding can be used. It can be used for COVID-19 response activities, which are ongoing, and we'll need funds for those. It can be used for economic recovery programs like providing grants to businesses or nonprofit organizations, providing housing for people at risk of homelessness, employment programs for assist people with a job and other benefits of that nature. And also the ARPA bill provides relief if the government is experiencing revenue loss that's specifically due to the pandemic. We have the opportunity to utilize funding to support government services. These funds are temporary and are advised to be used for non-recurring expenditures. And our Board of Supervisors has created an ARPA task force, which has convened to make recommendations on how those dollars should be spent. And we are expecting those recommendations before the end of this year. So the next slide shows we have our budget documents are posted online. We received budget requests from departments and on July 15th, and they are posted on the county website. It's county.milwaukee.gov/PSB. That's where you could find links to the budgets that are requested by departments. Those budget requests are not necessarily reflective of the final budget, but we are showing where we're at each step of the process. On the next slide is just our next steps on our budget. So we have already posted budgets earlier this week. We are in the process of having these town halls, with this being the first one. On October 1st is when the executive budget will be released, and our finance committee will be having deliberation on the budget in October before it gets adopted in November. And that was the final slide that I have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, County Executive Crowley and Joe Lamers, for your presentations. At this time, we'll transition to the public comment portion. Again, I want to reiterate our ground rules for participating this evening. Each person will have 2 minutes to make a comment and/or ask a question. The public will receive a reminder with 30 seconds remaining. Milwaukee County staff reserve the right to mute participants who do not adhere to our ground rules. So it looks like we have received one question that was submitted, and I will read it as it was submitted. In terms of sickle cell, is there any budget provided to provide better health care and shelter for people living with sickle cell in Milwaukee? I'm going to ask Director LeGrant if you want to respond to that question that was submitted.
Thank you, Director Fitch. So not in the budget, but we do have, so Department of Health and Human Services, we consist of multiple divisions. So we have our Behavioral Health Division, our Aging Division, Disability Services, our Housing, our Division of Youth and Family Services, and our Veteran Services. And under the two divisions, Disability Services and our Aging Division, we have resource centers where they provide information and assistance to assist individuals and getting them connected to resources for housing, for transportation, for healthcare. We have benefit specialists. And so we work very hard to make sure that people have those resources and are connected to those things, either in the community or if there's publicly funded long-term care programs or case management programs and those type of things that we can address to make sure that we are providing those resources.
Thank you, Director LeGrant. And also, you'll be able to find in our chat a document with resources that Director LeGrant referenced and contact information for those. If you did not have an opportunity to register in advance for questions and/or comments, you can still enter questions via Facebook Live, and we will answer those questions. At this time, I will call upon those that have registered and who would like to speak. I will begin with Athlean Peacock. If you are on the line, unmute yourself, and if you'd like to turn your camera on, please go ahead and do so. Okay, the next person that signed up to speak is Mildred Kobe. Again, if you can unmute yourself and turn on your camera, if you so please. Moving along, I have Denise Lavrance. Denise, if you're on the line, I see you're there. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to make a public comment. I'm Denise Lavrance, Chief Clinical Officer at Milwaukee Center for Independence, and I'm the chair of the Combined Community Services Board. And I want to just let the public know how much I appreciate and applaud County Exec David Crowley and the work that I've seen in the collaboration with Director of Health and Human Services, Shakita LeGrant, working with Shanika, Mike Lapham, and the entire team really lives and breathes the one county, one vision. And so for the public, I just want you to know how special these leaders are and how committed they are to improving the health of Milwaukee County. They really walk the talk, and I am blessed to be able to serve as the chair of the Combined Community Services Board as a way to continue to solicit the voice of those that we serve and continue to raise the bar in service. So that is my comment. So congratulations and thank you very much. I am definitely confident that with all the great leadership in the room, that we're going to be able to solve this and come up with some great ideas, and I will be part of that solution.
Thank you so much for your support. We could not do the work that we do here at Milwaukee County without servant leaders like yourself. So thank you again for those comments and encouraging words for us. At this time, I have up next, Nadia Groves. If you are on the line, please unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you see fit. Okay, moving along, I have next up Kijan Jennings. If you are on the line, please unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you'd like. The next person who has signed up to speak this evening is Julie Meyer. Julie, if you are on, if you could please unmute yourself and turn on your camera. Okay. Next, I'll go to Lydia Hernandez. If you are on the line, Lydia, you can unmute yourself and turn on your camera. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lydia Hernandez, and this is the first time that I've ever experienced being part of the Milwaukee County board meeting that you're having right now. I have a comment, and I also have two questions. My first comment is, or my first question is, how are we going to address mental health and AODA? With COVID, it has been a very, very bad experience, not only for the community, but also for myself, who I just recently lost my daughter to a fentanyl overdose, April 28th. This is her. And we tried resources to get help with insurance, without insurance. Rehab places wanted money. We just didn't have it. I just need to know, how can I get involved as well with the county to see how we can bring more awareness of the mental health and AODA that's happening in our community right now. So that's my first kind of comment and question at the same time.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call on two people to respond. I'm going to first call on, again, Director LeGrant, and then we will have Mr. Mike Lapham speak to your question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Fitch. And thank you for that question. we definitely want you at the table helping us because we know that mental health is so important for Milwaukee County. We know that it just does not affect people. It's not based on race or age. It affects everyone. So it does not discriminate. And so we are lifting up mental health. We lift it up in this budget and our next budget. We will continue to lift it up. And one thing I want to share with you before Mike joins is that we are investing in our mental health emergency center, and we're partnering with our private health systems. And that is a huge, that's really huge for us, because to think about our private health system and having a local government agency come together to say this is so important. We know that this is impacting everyone in Milwaukee County, especially as you think about the civil unrest, the COVID, and all of us, the isolation that, and not just, again, older adults, people with different abilities, our youth, as they go back to school. So we're lifting this up and bringing that new mental health emergency center right in the heart of Milwaukee County. So we're building that right on 12th and Valete, which is next to our COGS building. And what we know is that 90% of the people that we are serving out on Watertown Plank Road, Behavioral Health Division, and our PCS, they're from Milwaukee County. And 70% of those people are right in that proximity. So there's 8 zip codes on our north side and 2 on our south side. So what we say is that we need to bring it to where people are. We need to start bringing services to meet the people and wrap those services around them. So if someone comes to us with a mental health concern or issue, it's addressing that need and getting people stabilized, but also finding out what those underlying needs are. Are there Aoda concerns? Are there housing concerns? Are there, can we get them connected to healthcare or a case manager? And so there is a lot of work, and I want you to be at the table. And if you want to share your information, I can privately, I can put my email address in the chat, and then you can email me and we can, talk about ways that you can get involved. But there's a lot of things that we need to do, because it's together that we create those healthy communities. So we need everyone at the table. We need to hear your voice. We need to hear your ideas so that we can do this work together. Mike, can you add something? I know Mike Lapham is our BHD administrator, and I know he has tons to add here. So Mike.
Well, first off, ma'am, I'm so sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
It's such a tragic situation, and it's a significant challenge for our community. We do operate access points throughout our community. I can certainly share the numbers and the resources in the chat and make them available, but we do operate a number of access points where folks can access treatment without cost to them. And we do provide those connections and funding for folks who don't have insurance. And we also work with people to make connections to service if they have insurance through the Milwaukee County network. So there's a number of excellent providers in our community that we operate those clinics. But as Director LeGrand said, the Mental Health Emergency Center is a really exciting development in that it will be very well known, very centrally located, and it includes partnerships with a number of the local health systems that are present throughout our community. And so we really want to get the word out. I would love to speak with you about how you can help us get the word out. We want to share the message with families that services are available, they're effective, people do recover, and that is the biggest message I could give, is that we do have a high quality services for people, and we want to connect them to it efficiently.
And I would love to be at that table, not just for myself, but to also just bring awareness to people that there are, where those resources are and where they can get them. And just to bring awareness of the mental health and the AODA that our community is really suffering right now. And thank you for extending that opportunity.
Thank you, Lydia, for sharing. I'm glad that you want to get involved and be a resource for other families that are going through this tragedy.
Yes.
At this time, I will go with the last individual that has signed up to speak. And I just have a first name of Jason. So Jason, if you are on the line this evening, please unmute yourself and turn on your camera.
Good evening. You guys can hear me. Good evening, Mr. Crowley. My question is in regards to hopefully the budget finding a way to support the hardworking individuals working in corrections, say IU, the jail, the youth division. You got a lot of people down there that are working hard every day, come to work faithfully. It's dire situation, putting their life on the line every day for the public, and providing a great service that is greatly kind of looked at, negatively, I would say. But you got people that are, walking out or leaving every other day. You're losing a lot of good people due to, maybe they feel compensation isn't quite where it needs to be. It is a great job. The county is a great employer, but it's just that, we feel that, it's maybe not being supported in that way as far as adequate compensation for the service that is being provided down there by those great and hardworking individuals.
Thank you very much, Jason. I'm going to ask the superintendent to speak to this. Chantel, Jewel.
Good afternoon. Good evening, Jason. Thank you for your comments. We absolutely recognize the contributions that our correctional officers make day in and out, who give of themselves tirelessly. We also recognize the need to analyze and look at compensation patterns. And so we've been in conversations recently with the budget office to see how we can further address some of those concerns that you mentioned as it relates to compensation. But we absolutely agree with what you're saying. This job, the individuals in corrections are essential workers, and we could not. I say my human resources are my greatest resource. So we are working on different opportunities to increase our retention, our recruitment and retention. You're welcome.
All right, thank you to everyone that participated tonight in this very, very important COVID-safe opportunity for public input on Milwaukee County's 2022 budget. Now, there are 2 more opportunities to participate. The next one will be on Monday, August 23rd, and it was initially scheduled to be a in-person opportunity, but because of CDC guidelines, we have decided to move that one virtual for COVID precautions. It is from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., just like tonight's was, and you can register at county.milwaukee.gov/2022 budget. And if that does not work, and please share this with those that you know that would love to participate in this process with us, the next one after that will be on Tuesday, August 24th. And that one will start at 11:30 a.m. and go until 1 p.m. And again, the link to register is the same, county.milwaukee.gov/2022 budget. And then to close us out this evening, I will now turn it back over to County Executive David Crowley.
Well, thank you so much, Shanika. Really appreciate all your hard work on hosting this event, and all of our directors as well for answering as many questions as possible. But also want to thank everybody who attended and sharing your story. We want to do everything that we can to continue to move this community in the right direction. And because we truly believe that we can be the healthiest county, but we got a lot to do. And so it's going to take all of us really coming to the table to really get it done. And so I do have a call to action. I just want to, and Kyle, if you can put up that last slide again, but we do need folks' help when we think about how we tackle many of the issues that are directly affecting everyone throughout Milwaukee County. Because when you think about the issue that we are facing related to the disparities that we see all across this community, it doesn't just affect people of color, it affects us all. So it's extremely important that you go to myvote.wi.gov, find out who your legislator is, and contact them and let them know how important Milwaukee County is to you and how we need to continue to make it viable. And that's why we need the local option sales tax. So thank you again for joining us. It's going to take all of us coming to the table to really get this done. But again, if you want to follow up and you want to keep in touch with all of our updates related to this, please visit moveforwardmke.org. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. And please continue to watch out for all of these virtual budget town hall meetings because we want to make sure that you are giving us everything that you think we should be doing. So thank you again and enjoy your evening.